Well, welcome to the video discussion pertaining to the multiple perspectives in nursing. This is an interesting one because I think it really starts to look at the idea of the benefits of having a multiple approach to nursing as opposed to the grand theory approach that was originally tried. Anyways, talking about the articles, Warm and Schroeder, 1990. Again, getting a little bit older of an article, but the thing that I like about that is it's one of the best descriptions of the ideas of pragmatism. And pragmatism is actually quite influential within nursing, especially because of its foundation of the grounded theory method is rooted within pragmatism. A couple of things that I really liked about them was about this article was the way that they deal with some of the misconceptions about pragmatism. I think one of the first things that they deal with is the misconception that pragmatism is an actual philosophy, when I do actually like how their explanation is that it's more of an approach to research and actually theory generation. They describe it as a ethically bounded approach to philosophy, which I think that's actually a useful way to think about it. I think the other thing as well that they deal with is the notion of that pragmatism is a synonym for being concrete or practical, which it's really not. I mean, understandably that those words often come up when you're talking about pragmatism, but I think it's the idea more that the core principles of pragmatism have an action component to them. So if something is pragmatic, it's not being done just for the sake of knowledge generation. It's knowledge generation leading to an action is the idea. So certainly it does influence nursing theory a lot, and certainly when you talk about critical social research or some of those perspectives, pragmatism is clearly going to be part of that. Going on to the Reimer, Kirkham, and Anderson article, although this article talks about this debate between scientific orthodoxy and sort of a more flexible or open-minded approach to what they call post-colonialism and feminism, some of the core principles within these is the moving of the locus of control from the researcher to the actual participants or the person being studied, which is very crucial for both of these methods, I suppose we'd have to say, if you're talking about a post-colonial research method or a feminist research method. The idea is that you are not focusing on the output of the researcher, but you're focusing on the population being researched much more. It does tend to be a bit more of a pragmatic approach as a result. But certainly the idea of focusing on the population is crucial. Checking my notes here. Yes, such an idea tends to challenge the traditional view of the researcher and the research process, but is the benefits of research method and in ethical integrity. It's one of those things I'm going to ask you is, what is your thoughts about this approach or this solution to bridging kind of the concrete realities of research with opening up to more of a feminist or post-colonial idea within research? The last one actually is by Laboum, 2013 article, and the main idea with this article is to describe approach for both doing research as well as also education. The idea is for knowledge or truth to emerge from the experience within the learning environment. the idea is that for this particular activity that they're talking about is for students to have an emergent experience of learning social justice. And certainly the ideas of social justice are bandied about a lot within nursing, and it's often seen as one of the core values of nursing. Certainly can have difficulties. There certainly is a lot of resistance from most institutional structures to the idea of social justice, because again, it changes this perspective from the operation of the organization to a focus on the actual end result for the population. Do you think that the authors were able to accomplish this within their particular article that they're reporting? It's kind of an interesting question. They say that they're promoting social justice, but did they actually do it? I mean, it's an interesting idea. So now, talking about all three and about multiple perspectives. I'm not quite sure if you have clued in yet. I'm assuming you might have. But that each of these three articles kind of looks at a different spectrum of the constellation when we're looking at knowledge generation. Certainly when you look at Worms and Schroeder, they tend to be a very pragmatic, very concrete kind of, practice-driven kind of idea. Whereas Reimer, Kirkham, and Anderson tends to have a little bit more of the middle ground, in that they're sort of saying, yes, scientific orthodoxy, but with the idea of actually making sure that you actually acknowledge the end user of the researcher. Whereas Laboom is certainly more of just, whole experience of the user and no method and etc. I realize that's a little bit my interpretation, but I mean, it's just an interesting way of actually looking at knowledge generation and even a bit research methods with this. So it's kind of an interesting one, all the way to, what did they say, the Laboom, a poetic and performative narrative. What a great term anyway. So so when you think about some of the issues pertaining to the search for a grand theory, what we did actually last week, does it actually make sense why nursing has moved more towards the multiple perspectives? Can you see why nursing has tended to evolve towards that, and some of the pressures to move that direction as opposed to one grand theory? What do you think as far as some of these authors' interpretation and how far they actually pushed the envelope in various ways? Thinking about your own practice, do you see multiple perspectives influencing your area of practice? Do you think that a move towards multiple perspectives gives you more freedom to practice, or does it actually just make things more confusing? Within the three ideas presented by these articles, where would you place yourself on the constellation? Anyways, just a couple of things to think about with this week's discussion. Have a wonderful conversation.